Is the PS5 Pro canceled? Hogwarts Legacy previews are in and you're going to want to play this game. Here's the best way to experience the Last of Us game series. And here are the 5 games you should test the DualSense Edge on first. How's it going, everyone? Welcome to PSReady. The biggest story, obviously, this week is about the PS6 and the eventual PS5 Pro. But before we get to that, let's talk about some of the smaller news from this week. So first up, the previews are here for Hogwarts Legacy, and I was already sold on this game from the beginning. I used to stay up until like 2 or 3 in the morning reading and rereading the Harry Potter books under my blanket with a flashlight. I went and saw all of the movies day 1 in theaters. I even saw the first couple Fantastic Beast movies in theaters, and then that franchise sort of fell off. But you know, I'm a pretty big fan. I've been to Universal Studios in Florida, I've seen Hogsmeade, I've been on the trade, I've seen Diagon Alley, I've done the Harry Potter ride out here in LA. I didn't realize how big of a Harry Potter fan I was until I started talking about it, and that fandom like reignited in me when I read the previews for this game, because it sounds really cool. So you're gonna have a whole story section in this game where you're gonna be unraveling like a goblin uprising. It's also taking place in the 1800s, which I think is a really cool time period. It looks like it's going to be detached from the actual Harry Potter story because of how early on it's taking place. And I think it's cool that you're going to be playing as a 5th year transfer student. So it's not like you're going to start out in year 1 and work your way through the whole grade system of Hogwarts. You're going to be like a cool wizard who knows a lot of spells from go. And I think that was a smart way to go with this game. The coolest thing about it though, obviously, since you guys know I like horror, is the fact that you're going to be able to use the like killing spell and the torture spell in this game. I didn't think that was going to be an option just because, you know, this is a game that's trying to market itself to everyone, and that's kind of like a little bit more mature of a subject to put in a game like this. But if you look at the movies and the books, they do get pretty dark. So I was excited to hear that, yeah, you are going to be able to use these spells. I've seen a few people complaining on Twitter saying that that goes against the lore, and it's like, how could they miss that? These are the unforgivable curses. And personally, I think it's pretty obvious that this is going to play into the actual story, right? Like this game, like I just mentioned, takes place earlier on in the wizarding world, the 1800s. So I think we're probably going to end up seeing why these spells and curses become unforgivable, right? Like there had to be something that happened to cause that to happen. So I think that's what we're probably going to see in this game. The combat seems like really fluid, really cool. You can zip between different spells. You can use combos on people. The open world looks sweet. So yeah, this game's coming out February 9th. And if you want to do me a huge favor, use those links because I really appreciate it. So with The Last of Us show out now and being incredibly good, it's spiking sales of the game. So I figured for newer people to the channel who may have just gotten a PlayStation 5, I figured I'd round up all the ways you can play this series and tell you my thoughts on the best way to do it. So there's 3 versions of this game available right now. You can get The Last of Us Remastered for PlayStation 4 that works on your PS5 and it runs at 60 FPS. That's just a remaster of the PS3 game. So it's like upscaled textures and runs at a higher resolution and frame rate. You can also get The Last of Us Part 1, which is a $70 game. It's a full-on remake of the first game. I know people like to call it a remaster, but it's not a remaster. They rebuilt the entire game all the way down to the animations and the combat. Like everything in it is a lot better, and I would hazard a guess that a lot of the people saying that it's a remaster haven't actually played it, which I have multiple times. I play this game every year. I personally know that it feels a lot closer to The Last of Us Part 2. And speaking of that game, you can also pick that one up. Unfortunately, it's still only available on PS4, but you can get a 60 FPS patch for it that allows the game to run at 60 FPS on PS5, and it plays and looks wonderful at that resolution and frame rate. My favorite place to pick up games these days is Best Buy, mainly because while Amazon used to be really good and they would give you a discount if you pre-ordered games there and the games would show up day 1, they got rid of that discount, and also games don't ever show up on time for me from them for some reason anymore. So I end up returning the game once it shows up, and I buy the game day 1 at Best Buy anyway. And while sometimes Best Buy games are a little more expensive, they price match Amazon, so you can just get the cheaper prices in the long run anyway. So The Last of Us Part 1, right now, everywhere you get it, it's going to be $70. So if you want to play The Last of Us in its best form, I highly suggest picking up The Last of Us Part 1. Like I just mentioned, the upgrade is significant, and while yes, you can get The Last of Us Remastered for around $20 at Best Buy, it's worth the upgrade unless you're planning on playing the multiplayer. I think the combat is better. I think some of the changes to the level design are better. I think everything everything is just better in The Last of Us Part 1, except the multiplayer because it doesn't have it. And The Last of Us Part 2 is $40 at Best Buy, which is full price for that game right now, but it's on sale on a ton of different websites for like 20-25 bucks. So just find the cheapest version of it that isn't used, bring in a printout or a screenshot of that website to Best Buy, and they'll just honor the price because then you'll get the points for the game, and they have the most copies of it available from what I've been able to see. And then of course you also have the ability to get a $10 discount on The Last of Us Part 1 on Steam because it's $60 there, but unfortunately that version of the game doesn't come out till March 3rd, so you're gonna have to wait a little longer to play that. I'm crossing my fingers that it runs on Steam Deck, but man, after playing Uncharted 4 on Steam Deck, it runs at original settings, locked at 30. I have high hopes for The Last of Us Part 1. Oh, and speaking of Best Buy, I had a story on here that's basically like you don't need to get in line on PS Direct to get a PlayStation anymore, which is true. You can just get the console on its own. But when I was looking at The Last of Us games on Best Buy, I saw that right now you can get the God of War bundle for $560, which saves you $10 on the game, and you can pick it up in store or have it shipped right to your house. So if you're looking for a PS5, it'll probably be sold out because of this video. So yeah, if you're looking for a PS5, I would recommend that bundle because God of War is easily my game of the year for 2022. Next up, the DualSense Edge comes out today by the time you're seeing this video. I haven't got my hands on it yet, but there's an article over on Polygon letting you know what the 5 best games to try out with your DualSense Edge are. The first one being Red Dead Redemption 2. And the reason for that is there's aiming profiles on the controller that basically fix the aiming in this game. So it has like accelerated camera movement when you're aiming down the sights with any gun in Red Dead Redemption 2. And it gets a little bit floaty, but if you use this precise aiming feature that the DualSense Edge has, it allegedly fixes the aiming in that game. And I'm honestly pretty excited to try that out. The second game on the list is Horizon Forbidden West, and the steady mode with the analog sticks is the way to go for aiming there. And you can also map items to the back button so you don't have to flick up on the D-pad, which seems cool. Elden Ring is 4th on the list. The back buttons come in clutch there. You can switch between weapons and of course spells. And I want to try to map the horse to a back button. I wonder if you can do combinations because I think you need L1 and triangle to call in the horse. So hopefully you can do combo button hits because you can do that on the Steam Deck and it's awesome. And then the 5th game is Warhammer Vermintide 2. I absolutely love this game, and basically, yeah, you use the back buttons to switch between weapons and explosives, but you can also use the trigger stops to make shooting your arrows or your ranged weapons a lot faster. So those are the 5 games that Polygon recommends trying out first with your DualSense Edge. I am definitely going to be trying out Dead Space. All right, so the last story today is about the PlayStation 5 Pro and the PlayStation 6. So the whole saga here is that we know there's going to be a PS5 Slim by the end of this year, and it's not really going to be a PS5 Slim. Tom Henderson over at Insider Gaming is the person who's kind of like leaked this from the very start, and the way he understands it and the way he's been reporting on it basically makes it sound like it's not going to be like the jump we saw between the launch PS4 and the PS4 Slim. It's going to be more of an internal change with the actual PS5. They're just streamlining it, so there's going to be one console, a digital console that has an external disk drive that can be attached to the digital console, and then you'll put the side plate on and it'll look just like the current PS5, which honestly seems pretty cool to me. It's a good way to stop people who haven't been able to get a PS5 until now from being upset and feeling like they have buyer's remorse, because at the end of the day, it's going to be the same PS5 as the one they already have. The issue is Sony isn't retroactively making this disk drive work for the digital edition they've been selling since 2020. But if you look at the data, that one's selling far less units than the disk drive model of the console has been, so it's not really affecting too many people. I'm not like making excuses for them because I still think it sucks and they should figure out a way to make the disk drive work with that digital model. It's just like I can see the thought process there, and it makes sense that they'd want to streamline it into one console that comes in 2 variants. The weird thing is we've never heard anything about the PS5 Pro from any of these leakers that are actually verified. We talked about a story earlier this week where there's going to be a PS5 Pro in April of this year and it was going to have liquid cooling, and I immediately kind of called BS on that just because it doesn't seem logical in any way for Sony to release a PS5 Pro that early and have the PS5 Slim come out later this year. And the interesting thing there is that Tom Henderson responded to this story and basically said he's not only heard more about the PS6 than the PS5 Slim, but that Sony might skip the PS5 Slim this generation altogether. And honestly, I think people are really going to be excited to hear that, and it makes a lot of sense to me. So with the PS4 and Xbox One, basically both of those consoles released super weak because they were ready to go for a long time, but because of the recession, the generation before with the PS3 and Xbox 360 got extended. So basically these things were ready to go, and and by the time they came out, they were both pretty underpowered. So to keep games running at even good resolutions like 1080p and 30 FPS, Sony basically had to put out a PS4 Pro during the middle of that generation, and the same thing goes for the Xbox One X. But with this generation, the consoles we got at launch are extremely powerful across the board. I know on paper, technically, the Xbox Series X is more powerful, but thankfully for us PS5 owners, that hasn't resulted in games looking or running better on the Series X for the most part. Like even games like Monster Hunter Rise, which is originally a Switch title and has been out for years now, that game runs significantly better on the PlayStation 5 than the Xbox Series X. But the difference between the two is very minor, and we've seen a lot of games hitting high resolutions at 60 FPS, and some of them even going all the way up to 120 FPS, which is awesome. We've seen a couple games come out like A Plague Tale Requiem and Gotham Knights, but really A Plague Tale Requiem is more of a AA game, and it's going for more graphic fidelity than something like, I don't know, Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2. And then when it comes to something like Gotham Knights, I think the biggest reason that game is running at 30 FPS on PS5 and Xbox Series X is because it's completely unfinished. It doesn't even hold 30 FPS. It's like a horribly frame-paced game. If you look at any videos of it, you can see it jittering if you pan the camera around, and that is not good. So I think it's fair to say that for the most part with the PlayStation 5, we can expect this thing to at least hit 60 FPS at 1440p or 1080p, and it doesn't look like that's going to change going forward, because even with games that look really good like Horizon Forbidden West, God of War Ragnarok, or The Last of Us Part 2, even the full-on remake of Demon's Souls, like some of these games are the best looking games ever made, and they run at 60 frames per second. So yeah, I feel like it's kind of making sense to me that Sony might be skipping the PS5 Pro this generation and really just focusing on this design with the PlayStation 5. I think we will probably end up seeing a PS5 Slim, like a true Slim, not this new version that's basically going to look exactly like the PS5 we have now. It's going to be a full-on Slim like what we saw with the PS2 back in the day. I would just expect it to come out after the PS6 is announced towards the end of this generation, and then it'll be really cheap compared to the PS6 like we saw with the PS3 and PS2, because the PS2 lived on for a very, very long time. It ended up just being like sports games and Rock Band and Just Dance and stuff like that, but Sony was still selling games for it for a very long time, and it looks like this generation could be exactly the same. So in the long run, I think this is good news overall, especially if you're someone who just bought a PlayStation 5 or you're looking at buying one now. I don't think it's worth waiting for this rumored PS5 Slim just because it's going to be the same console you can get right now. It's just going to have a detachable disc drive. So if you don't have the funds right now and you're looking at a digital model, maybe you could wait for this one and get the digital version, and then when you can afford it, pick up the disc drive later on. But if you can afford the disc model right now, I mean, I just talked about how you can literally go on Best Buy, get it for 560 bucks and have God of War Ragnarok ready to go day one when this console just shows up on your doorstep, and you cannot beat that deal. So yeah, all of this is to say, while we're probably going to end up getting some Pro model of the Xbox Series X, Sony has delivered on the game so far this generation, and that's ultimately what I care about. So the idea of it going back to normal and just having a PS5 for an entire generation, I kind of like that. I'm obviously into new hardware though, and I would love to make a video about a new PS5, so I'm definitely not going to complain about a PS5 Pro if we do end up getting one though.